Hello, my sensational students. Welcome to Bloom and Grow Education. My name is Meredith. Today's lesson is suitable for a Year 5 student who is preparing for the Gifted and Talented test. It is a reading comprehension lesson. So we are doing the text and questions that are provided by the Department of Education as a sample example of something that they might provide in their GATE test. The questions, answers, and texts are all freely available on the internet, and I'm just going through the text to help to explain them and why the answers are right or wrong, because there's no point having a ticker across if you don't know why it's right or wrong. So you need to read the text, answer the questions, and then come back and watch this video for the answers. That stuff is all available in the description box below. Okay, this is our text. It's called Wildlife at Risk, and I'm going to discuss it because there's quite a few tricky things in here which I can understand. I can understand if you're getting some of these questions and answers wrong, because there's a lot of complicated information in here. So the following figures show various threats to wildlife populations worldwide. In Figure 1, habitat refers to the kind of environment or place an animal lives. Figure 2, terrestrial species, which is this here, refers to land animals. Fresh water to those who live in rivers, lakes, and other inland water areas. And marine species to those of the ocean. So land, fresh water, and ocean. So then we've got these words here. Exploitation. Exploitation is a tricky one because there are a number of ways that you can exploit something. You can exploit a person, you can exploit a situation, you can feel emotionally exploited, you can exploit an animal or a forest. So it means, in general, it means to take advantage of something. So you might go and help somebody in their garden for 5 weeks in a row. And then when you're like, oh, can you come over next week and mow my lawn? And they're like, no, I'm too busy. Well, you would feel exploited. Let's look at habitat degradation and habitat loss. Habitat degradation is when the habitat degrades, which means it's starting to fall apart. So it might be that all of the bees have been killed. And so now the bees can't pollinate the flowers. And now the flowers can't turn into berries. And then the berries can't be eaten by the bears. And now the bears don't have fruit to eat. There's no bees, so they have no honey to eat. So something has happened that has caused it to degrade and break down. Whereas habitat loss is when they've come in and wiped it out. So this is what the problem with palm oil is that people come in and they cut down the forests, the jungles, to plant crops of palm oil trees, and then the orangutans have nowhere to live because they've lost their forest home. So degradation means it's falling apart, whereas loss is it's gone. Next, we have climate change. You guys know about that. So the global warming is causing the ice to melt. Pollution, you guys know pollution, that's rubbish and chemicals and petrol spills and things like that. Let's talk about invasive species and disease. So let's talk about an invasive species. So an invasive species is a species of animals that has been introduced into an environment and they don't belong there. They're called feral. So in Australia, that's cats, dogs, foxes, rats, rabbits, and to some extent, I mean, obviously things like cattle, like sheep and horses and cows, but that's sort of a bit different. So what we're talking about here is usually predators. So if you think about a koala's up there in this tree, eating its gum leaves, having a sleep, and it's evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to be safe up in its tree. And then somebody brings along a cat, and a cat can climb a tree. Now, beforehand, that koala had nothing that could reach it. It was safe up in its tree. There weren't any creatures who could climb up there and get it. But now there's this cat who can climb up there and can kill it. And it hasn't evolved to be able to defend itself. So you get lots of animals like that where, because they haven't evolved to be able to defend themselves from this new introduced species, they get wiped out. And they become endangered and extinct because these very successful predators in cats and dogs and rats and things like that, they're very effective killers. And the native species, the numbats and wombats and quolls and quokkas and all these things, they can't defend themselves against it. So then they just get wiped out. So that's an invasive species. The other one is disease. Now, you guys obviously know what disease is, but to give you an example, there is a disease in the Tasmanian devil where it's a cancer that is spread by contact. So the Tasmanian devils, they like to live in burrows, and they cuddle up to each other and they slide past each other. So a cancer that's transmitted by contact is obviously going to be a problem when you're in contact with everything. It's like a bear is a solitary creature, a lion is a solitary creature. It's probably not going to be a problem for them, but for these little creatures who live in these burrows all together, it's a huge problem. And so what they've actually had to do is get healthy Tasmanian devils and remove them completely, and because there's no cure for this cancer, so they have to let those populations die and keep these populations safe. And it's the only way to keep the Tasmanian devil safe is to let those other ones die and kill off the disease and try and keep these ones safe. So that's one of the ways that disease works. And disease is not always, we're going to talk about human influence. Human influence is not always, people get sick. Like, people get sick, animals get sick. That's just the nature of nature. Okay, let's have a look at the questions. So which of these could replace exploitation? So abuse is when you hurt an animal. You might whip it or beat it in order to get it to do what you want. Neglect is not looking after the animal properly, not feeding it, not giving it shelter, not giving it water. That's neglect, not looking after it properly. Harvesting is when you go out and you harvest your crop of wheat, or you pull all your plums off your trees. And overhunting is when you go in and you hunt an animal. So if you think about the indigenous people, they hunted kangaroos and koalas and goannas and what have you, emus. And they understood that you can only hunt at specific times, because if the emus are having babies, then you can't kill them whilst they're having babies, because then those babies can't have babies who can't have babies, and now the emus are extinct. So they kill to eat for meat, but they do it in a controlled way so that the species can continue to live, which means that they can continue to live. Whereas overhunting is just going in and wiping them out and just taking advantage of the situation. So this is what happened when white people went to the US. So the Native Americans had lived in harmony with the buffalo herds. They would kill off a few to eat, but in general they would have these ginormous herds. And then the white people came and they were like, look at this giant cow, let's go and shoot them all and sell them for profit. And they're not an endangered species now, but they were down to like 2 of them or something. They were right on the brink. Overhunting is going in and taking and killing them off, regardless of how you care about the species, about the longevity of the species continuing. It's a lot like what's happening with the whale shark video, if you've watched that one, where people will go in and hunt the whale sharks because they're looking for a quick buck rather than thinking about the long-term future of the species. So that's the one where the exploitation comes in. So they're exploiting the situation. They're exploiting all of the whales in the ocean for their own financial benefit rather than thinking about the long term. Well, if we stop killing them, then we'll be able to, if we don't kill them all, then we can live longer, kind of an idea. So correct answer there is overhunting. So they're taking advantage of the situation. They're overhunting all of the whales for their fat and their blubber and their bones and their skin and their meat without caring about whether or not the species is going to become extinct. Figure 1 and 2 suggest that decreases in wildlife population are most influenced by natural changes to habitat. So if we look simply at exploitation, humans are exploiting the situation. It's not natural. The disease one, that's natural, but that's only 1 out of how many other 7. Human-related activity, that's definitely possible, but let's keep on going. Weather-related phenomenon. Now that one, it could be true because habitat degradation could be because a huge cyclone has come in, or a tsunami, or a snowstorm has come in. But usually those kind of climatic changes, the creatures have evolved to cope with that. So accepting asteroids hitting the planet and destroying all the dinosaurs, usually if there's a huge snowstorm, then the animals can just like burrow down into their little nests and be safe. And then we've got the spread of infectious diseases. Again, that is one of them, but it is not what is most influenced. So what is most influencing this situation? Overhunting, people going in and destroying the forest, wiping the forest out and polluting, and the pollution causing climate change and introducing invasive species. People are doing all of this. And so what is it most influenced by? It's influenced by what people are doing. Correct answer is B. Okay, last one. And this one again is tricky. Irrelevant means that they have nothing to do with each other. So to say that these two things have nothing to do with each other, that's not correct. Like sales of ice cream and sales of rulers or pencils or erasers, that's irrelevant data. They have nothing to do with each other. These two things, they're related in a way. Complements, it could be complements. Let's keep on going. Contradicts. Contradicts means that it says the opposite thing. So it would mean that figure 1 says the dams and the weirs and the lakes and the rivers, they're all bursting with water. And figure 2 says that we're in a state of drought. That would be contradicting. Okay. Figure 2 explains figure 1. So we've got to work out if it's complementing or explaining. And correct answer is B, is complementing. Because it doesn't really explain anything. It just gives you some data facts which you have to interpret by yourself. So looking at these percentages, looking at the dot graphs, looking at the dots, looking at the pie graph, looking at the bar graph, looking at the animals and the numbers and all this kind of things. I mean, that's a mathematical skill in itself. But one thing doesn't explain the other thing. You use the two pieces of data together to help you to understand what the data is saying. So they complement each other. They go together to help you to understand it. So correct answer there is B. Okie dokie. And that brings us to the end of this lesson on wildlife at risk. Thank you very much for joining me, and I'd really appreciate it if you could please thank me in return by liking this video and subscribing to my YouTube channel. This is a series of lessons, so please head down to the description and check out the next. So please head down to the description and check out the next lesson. See you next time.